What if the moment you felt most misunderstood was the very moment God was revealing his truth through you? What if the loudest voices in the room were not the ones closest to heaven? And what if Jesus stood today in the middle of our confusion and said, "Do not judge by appearances, but judge with righteous judgment"? The festival was alive with noise, color, and expectation. Pilgrims filled the streets of Jerusalem. Religious leaders moved through the crowds with authority. Families gathered, prayers rose, traditions were honored. It was a sacred time, a holy time. Yet beneath the celebration was tension. Some whispered about Jesus, others argued. Some were curious, others were already decided against him. The leaders had been seeking a way to silence him, and yet in the middle of the feast, without formal invitation, without rabbinic credentials, without their approval, Jesus stood up and began to teach. It was bold, it was unexpected, and it was perfectly timed. John tells us that about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. Not at the beginning, not when anticipation was highest, but in the middle, when opinions had already formed, when conversations were already swirling, when expectations had already been shaped. Sometimes God speaks not at the beginning of our confusion, but in the middle of it. The people were astonished. How is it that this man has learning, they asked, when he has never studied? They saw wisdom, they heard authority, they sensed depth, but they could not reconcile it with his background. He had not trained in their schools, he had not sat under their famous rabbis, he did not carry their endorsement, and so their astonishment quickly turned into suspicion. Jesus answered them with clarity. "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me." This is the heart of his authority. He was not speaking to impress, he was not teaching to gain influence, he was not building a reputation. His words were rooted in the Father. His message flowed from obedience. True authority does not come from human applause, it comes from divine alignment. Jesus continued, "If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority." Notice what he says. Understanding is not merely intellectual, it is connected to the will. If someone truly desires to do God's will, they will recognize God's voice. Spiritual clarity begins with surrendered desire. Many people struggle not because the truth is hidden, but because the heart is divided. When the will is bent toward God, the mind begins to see clearly. When the heart is humble, discernment grows. Jesus exposes the difference between self-seeking speech and God-centered teaching. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, he says, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true. This is a powerful test for every teacher, every leader, every believer. Who receives the glory? Is the message drawing attention to the messenger, or is it pointing upward? Jesus never sought his own fame. Even when crowds gathered, even when miracles stunned the people, his focus remained on the Father. His obedience was unwavering. And yet, despite his clarity, despite his wisdom, despite his consistency, the resistance did not disappear. He confronts them directly. "Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" The crowd responds defensively. "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" But Jesus knows what is in the hearts of the leaders. He knows the plans forming behind closed doors. He knows the quiet strategies of opposition. Here is something important. The rejection of truth often hides behind religious language. The very people entrusted with the law were plotting against the one who fulfilled it. The guardians of tradition were resisting the fulfillment of their own scriptures. Religion without relationship can become blindness. Jesus reminds them of the miracle he performed on the Sabbath, healing the man who had been paralyzed. That act of mercy stirred outrage among the leaders. Why? Because it happened on the Sabbath. He explains their inconsistency. They circumcise a child on the Sabbath to keep the law of Moses intact. If the 8th day falls on the Sabbath, they proceed. Why? Because obedience to the covenant sign matters. So, Jesus says, if on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Their logic collapses under his reasoning. They were willing to perform a minor surgical act on the Sabbath to maintain tradition, but they were unwilling to rejoice when a broken body was restored. This is what legalism does. It magnifies technical obedience while neglecting compassion. Jesus was not breaking the Sabbath, he was revealing its purpose. The Sabbath was made for restoration, for life, for wholeness. And here stood a man who had been healed, fully, completely, mercifully. And still they criticized. Then comes the command that echoes through centuries. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with righteous judgment. How often do we judge by what we see on the surface? We evaluate by credentials, by background, by social standing, by familiarity. We assume authority must look a certain way. We assume God's work must fit our expectations. But righteous judgment looks deeper. It examines motives, it considers fruit, it listens carefully. The people at the festival were divided. Some said he is a good man. Others said no, he is leading the people astray. Yet many were afraid to speak openly because of the leaders. Fear silences truth. But Jesus did not shrink back. In the middle of opposition, in the middle of confusion, in the middle of public scrutiny, he taught openly. Not recklessly, but faithfully. Not angrily, but clearly. There is courage in obedience. When we anchor our words in God's will, we are freed from the need for human approval. Jesus' confidence did not come from crowd support. It came from the Father's sending. My teaching is not mine. What humility. He did not cling independent authority. He rested in submission. And from that submission flowed strength. There is a lesson here for every believer who feels overlooked or underestimated. The people questioned Jesus because he had not studied in their schools. They could not trace his learning to their institutions. But heaven was his source. We may not always have the recognition of the world. We may not always carry impressive titles. But when our lives are aligned with God's will, there is a depth that no credential can replace. At the same time, this passage challenges our own hearts. Are we quick to dismiss what does not fit our expectations? Are we more concerned with external conformity than inner transformation? Are we guarding traditions more fiercely than we are guarding mercy? The leaders clung to Sabbath regulations while missing the miracle standing before them. They saw a technical violation where God saw restoration. Sometimes our familiarity with Scripture can dull our sensitivity to its heart. Jesus did not abolish the law, he fulfilled it. He revealed its true intention. The law pointed toward life, toward holiness, toward communion with God. It was never meant to become a weapon against healing. When he healed that man, he was not rebelling against Moses. He was embodying the compassion that the law itself reflected. Yet the leaders' hearts were hard, and hardness of heart can exist even in the most religious environments. That is why Jesus connects discernment to willingness. If anyone's will is to do God's will, the question is not merely, do I understand, but am I willing? Am I willing to follow truth even when it confronts my assumptions? Am I willing to acknowledge God's work even when it comes through unexpected people? Am I willing to judge righteously beyond appearances? At the festival, Jesus stood alone in many ways. The leaders opposed him. The crowds were divided. His own brothers earlier had misunderstood him. Yet he continued teaching. Obedience does not wait for unanimous support. Faithfulness does not require universal approval. There may be seasons when you feel like you are standing in the middle of a crowd that does not understand you. There may be moments when your obedience to God invites misunderstanding rather than applause. Remember this scene. Jesus in the middle of the feast, voices swirling, questions rising, opposition forming. And still he teaches. He does not shout, he does not manipulate, he reasons, he points to Scripture, he exposes inconsistency, he calls for deeper judgment. There is patience in his firmness, there is compassion even in his confrontation, and there is truth without compromise. When he says do not judge by appearances, he is inviting us into a higher way of seeing, a way that examines the heart, a way that measures by God's character, not by cultural expectation. Righteous judgment is not harsh criticism. It is discernment rooted in truth and love. The leaders judged Jesus by his background. The crowd judged him by rumors, but the Father judged him by obedience. Whose judgment matters most in your life? In a world of constant evaluation, likes, comments, opinions, comparisons, it is easy to become driven by appearances. We craft images, we defend reputations, we react to criticism. Jesus shows another path. Seek the glory of the one who sent you. If you are a follower of Christ, you too are sent. Sent into families, sent into workplaces, sent into communities, sent into digital spaces. And the temptation will always be to seek your own glory. But the freedom comes when you surrender that desire. When you speak not to impress, but to honor God. When you act not to elevate yourself, but to reflect His character. When you serve not to be noticed, but because you are aligned with His will. The people at the festival were amazed by Jesus' learning, yet the deeper amazement should have been His alignment. His words and the Father's will were one. His actions and God's compassion were united. His teaching and divine truth were inseparable. That is the kind of life we are invited into. A life where obedience shapes understanding. A life where humility anchors authority. A life where mercy outweighs legalism. A life where righteous judgment replaces shallow evaluation. As we reflect on John 7:14-24, we are not merely observing a historical debate in the temple courts. We are looking into a mirror. Where might we be judging by appearances? Where might we be resisting truth because it challenges our comfort? Where might we be clinging to technicalities while missing transformation? And where is God calling us to stand, quietly, faithfully, courageously, in the middle of our own festival, speaking truth rooted not in ourselves, but in Him? Jesus' teaching at the feast reminds us that truth does not need perfect conditions to be proclaimed. It needs obedient hearts. It reminds us that discernment begins with willingness. It reminds us that God's work may not always align with our expectations, but it will always align with His character. And it reminds us that mercy is not a violation of holiness, it is its fulfillment. Today, as you go about your life, remember the voice of Christ in the temple. Do not judge by appearances. Seek God's will. Examine your motives. Choose mercy. And when you are misunderstood, when your obedience feels costly, when your words are questioned, remember that your authority comes not from human validation, but from alignment with the one who sent you. Thank you for watching this video. If this reflection encouraged you or challenged your heart, please like this video, follow the Holy Path Insights channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth of Jesus' words today. May we all learn to judge righteously and walk faithfully in His light.